In a small, shadowy corner of the city, there was a figure so fearsome that even the whisper of his name sent chills down people's spines. This man was known as Don Salvatore, the notorious mafia boss who ruled the underground world with an iron fist. The air around him crackled with danger, and everyone knew to keep their distance. But it wasn't just his reputation that kept people away. It was his attacked dog, a massive creature named Thor, who stood like a living wall beside him. Thor was not just any dog. He was a mix of powerful breeds, with muscles rippling under his glossy black fur. His eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence, and he had a growl that could freeze anyone in their tracks. People in the neighborhood told stories of how Thor could scare off anyone who dared to approach Don Salvatore. Many claimed that once you were in his sights, you were as good as gone. The dog was both a protector and an enforcer, ensuring that no one dared to challenge the mafia boss. Don Salvatore loved Thor like a son. He had raised him from a tiny puppy, training him to be loyal and fierce. They were inseparable. Wherever the boss went, Thor followed closely at his heels. They shared a special bond that few could understand. The mafia boss saw in Thor not just a guard dog, but a companion who had been by his side through thick and thin. On quiet nights, when the streets were empty and silent, you could often find Don Salvatore sitting on a stool outside his dimly lit lair. He would stroke Thor's powerful back, murmuring softly to him like they were sharing secrets only they could comprehend. Passers-by would glance cautiously at the pair, their hearts pounding with fear and curiosity. No one dared to approach. The town had learned to live with the presence of Don Salvatore and Thor. People created wide arcs around their territory, weaving through alleys and streets just to avoid confrontation. Parents would warn their children about the dangerous duo, telling tales of how anyone who got too close would be met with snarls and bites. The stories grew larger than life. Children played games pretending to be brave enough to face the great beast, while secretly hoping they never would have to. Yet beneath all the fear lay whispers of something deeper, a sense of sadness that surrounded Don Salvatore. Some wondered if perhaps he was lonely despite being feared by all. He had lost many people over the years, and though he wore his toughness like armor, there were moments when his eyes showed a flicker of vulnerability, when he thought no one was watching. As time passed, people began to forget what life was like before Don Salvatore claimed his spot in the city's shadows. They became accustomed to living in fear, never questioning why it had come to this, or if there was another way. For them, it was easier to close their eyes to the loneliness hidden behind the tough exterior of the mafia boss and his fierce dog. But little did they know that change was on the horizon, change that would come in an unexpected form. It would take someone brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to step into their world and challenge everything they thought they knew. As fate would have it, this person wasn't an adult or someone armed with bravado. It was a homeless girl whose life had been filled with struggles far beyond what they could imagine. With each passing day, she roamed the streets gathering scraps of hope and food. Her curiosity about the world around her often led her closer to places where she should have stayed away. Little did she know that her innocent spirit would soon intersect with the dark lives of Don Salvatore and Thor, creating a moment that would change everything for them all. The presence of Don Salvatore and Thor cast a long shadow over the town, creating an atmosphere thick with fear and tension. Whispers filled the air, spreading tales of the mafia boss's ruthless ways and his ferocious dog. Children would huddle close to their parents on their way home, avoiding the dark alley where the two were often found. It was a place to be shunned, Even a casual stroll past that corner was enough to send tingling shivers down spines. Parents took every opportunity to instill caution in their children. "Stay away from that part of town," they would say, eyes wide with worry. "Don Salvatore has a dog that will bite." The stories grew more exaggerated with each telling. Thor was said to have taken down grown men single-handedly, his jaws like steel traps that could snap shut in an instant. The children, half terrified and half intrigued, played games that imitated bravery, pretending they could face Thor without flinching. They would dare each other to approach the alley, though none ever gathered enough courage to do so. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the townspeople learned to adapt. They created elaborate detours around the area, finding new routes just to avoid any chance encounter with the Mafia boss or his dog. Shops were strategically selected based on distance from that infamous corner. Grocery lists were planned with extra care. The town's rhythm changed as everyone became hyper-aware of their surroundings, not wanting to be caught off guard by a sudden growl or barking. Despite all this fear, there lay an undercurrent of curiosity among some residents. They often whispered about what it might be like behind those closed doors where Don Salvatore ruled with absolute authority. What kind of life did he lead? Did he ever experience happiness? When people spotted him at night sitting on his stool with Thor by his side, they wondered if there was more beneath his hardened exterior than just a heart of stone. Yet no one dared approach him or even speak of it aloud for fear that someone might overhear. To question or challenge the status quo could invite trouble, something no one was willing to risk. The town carried on in silence, its people bound by both fear and fascination. As time went by, some began to discuss more openly how sad it was that someone like Don Salvatore felt he needed to instill such terror in others. Rumors circulated about how he had lost loved ones in past conflicts, and how perhaps his tough demeanor was simply a shield against further pain. But those thoughts remained only whispers between trusted friends. They never reached him. Then, one fateful day, as routines wove through the fabric of life in town, something shifted in the air, a hint of change brewing just beyond their comfort zones. A few townsfolk noticed a scrappy little girl wandering close to the forbidden alleyway. Her tattered clothes and dirty face marked her as someone who didn't belong there at all. She didn't seem frightened by Thor's fierce growl or Don Salvatore's imposing figure. Instead, she stared back with wide eyes filled with curiosity rather than dread. This caught the attention of passers-by who watched from a distance, frozen in disbelief at her audacity. "What is she doing?" one woman whispered to her husband as they stood hidden behind a nearby shop front. "I don't know," he replied nervously, gripping her arm tighter as if expecting trouble at any moment. The townspeople held their breath as they watched this unexpected encounter unfold, wondering if this girl possessed a bravery none had shown before, or if she was simply unaware of the danger lurking right before her eyes. Little did they know that this homeless girl would soon challenge everything they thought they knew about fear and companionship in their darkened corner of the world. In a world filled with shadows, there lived a homeless girl named Mia. She was small for her age, with tangled hair that fell in knots around her face and clothes that had seen better days. Despite her rough appearance, there was a light in her deep brown eyes that suggested an indomitable spirit. Mia had learned to navigate the harsh streets of the city, surviving each day as best as she could. Mia's journey through life had not been easy. She had lost her family when she was very young and had been on her own ever since. At night, she would find shelter wherever she could, sometimes in abandoned buildings, other times under bridges or in alleyways where no one would disturb her. The world around her was unforgiving, yet Mia had a resilience that allowed her to keep moving forward. Every morning, she woke up to the sounds of the bustling city, the honks of cars and chatter of people creating a soundtrack to her daily struggles. With each dawn, she set out to gather food scraps from dumpsters or search for items others had discarded that might aid her in some way. While many children her age went to school and played with friends, Mia had learned to be resourceful and independent, relying on her instincts to survive. One day, as she roamed the streets looking for something to eat, she found herself drawn toward the dark alleyway where Don Salvatore and Thor were often spotted. It wasn't fear that pulled her closer. Instead, it was an unexplainable curiosity bubbling within her. Mia liked to observe the world around her, and this corner was different. It pulsed with an energy that both frightened and intrigued her. Even from a distance, she could feel Thor's powerful presence. He stood like an imposing figure beside the Mafia boss, a living embodiment of strength and danger. Most people couldn't bear to get close enough to even see the dog up close. They would dart past nervously, casting wary glances at the fearsome duo. But not Mia. She felt a strange urge to approach them. As fate would have it, on that particular day, something inside her urged Mia to step forward. She crept closer to the alleyway while hiding behind a nearby dumpster, peering out cautiously. As she watched the scene unfold before her, an unusual thought crossed her mind. What if Thor wasn't just a vicious beast, but also lonely like herself? The idea struck a chord deep within her. While others feared Thor and his menacing growl, Mia noticed how he seemed to observe everything with intelligent eyes, watching the world go by as if longing for something more than his life of guarding and intimidation. Her heart softened. She felt empathy for him, despite knowing what everyone said about the dog's ferocity. Mia had often felt like an outsider, too, someone who didn't quite belong anywhere but carried on regardless. This connection spurred her bravery even further. Her heart raced as she took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the dumpster, inching closer to where Don Salvatore sat, with his loyal companion. "Hey there," she whispered softly, hoping Thor would hear her gentle voice rather than see a threat before him. As she crouched down a few feet away from them, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of stale bread, a little treasure she had found earlier. With wide eyes filled with kindness rather than fear, Mia held the bread out towards Thor, offering it as if extending friendship instead of fear in this dangerous space where danger usually ruled supreme. She sensed a moment of hesitation, the air around them still as both Don Salvatore and Thor turned their attention toward this unexpected newcomer. Little did everyone know that this simple act, a small girl offering food, was about to change everything in ways they could never have imagined. Would they understand that sometimes it takes vulnerability to challenge fear? In this moment filled with uncertainty and hope, the homeless girl was ready to break through walls built by fear and loneliness alike. As Mia crouched just a few feet away from Thor, her heart raced with both fear and excitement. The monstrous dog stood tall, muscles rippling under his shiny black coat, his fierce eyes fixed on her. To the rest of the town, Thor was a creature to be avoided at all costs, a beast that sent shivers down spines and kept people awake at night. But to Mia, he was more than just a guard dog. He was a symbol of strength and resilience, much like herself. She had seen Thor from a distance many times before, always lurking in the shadows beside Don Salvatore. While others had run away in fright, Mia felt an inexplicable pull toward him. There was something about the way he watched the world around him, his curious gaze peering into the lives of those who dared not approach, that intrigued her. Unlike most dogs she had encountered, who barked joyfully or wagged their tails at strangers, Thor remained stoic and vigilant, as if guarding secrets only he understood. As she held out the piece of stale bread, she couldn't help but wonder what Thor must feel in his solitary life by Don Salvatore's side. Did he ever wish for companionship? Did he long for love like she did? Mia imagined what it would be like to be in his shoes, always feared and never accepted. It made her heart ache for him. "Hey there," she whispered again, her voice barely above a breath. She took another cautious step closer, feeling the tension crackle in the air as both Don Salvatore and Thor focused intently on her small form. For everyone else in town, this moment would have seemed ridiculous. A mere child daring to approach a creature known for its ferocity and an equally terrifying man. But for Mia, it felt right. Thor's growl rumbled softly in his throat, as if warning her to back away. Yet instead of running off like everyone else would have done, Mia simply knelt there with the bread extended toward him, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could see the kindness behind her gesture. She believed that deep down inside him lay a heart capable of understanding love despite being raised amidst fear. In that moment, Mia's curiosity transformed into determination. She wanted to understand this creature better, to figure out if beneath his rough exterior was an animal that craved affection rather than dread. Perhaps she could befriend him where others had failed. "Please," she murmured softly, as if speaking to a friend rather than a terrifying beast. "I know you're strong and tough, but I can be your friend." Her words hung in the air between them, fragile yet hopeful. Suddenly something shifted within Thor. Instead of lunging forward or barking fiercely as expected, he took a tentative step closer to Mia. His powerful frame relaxed slightly, and for a fleeting moment, curiosity flickered in his eyes too. Don Salvatore watched with narrowed eyes, surprised by this peculiar exchange unfolding before him. He had seen many people come and go, each one trembling at the sight of his dog, but this girl was different. There was no fear etched on her face. Instead, it was filled with compassion and understanding. Mia continued to hold out her offering while slowly inching forward even more. She felt like they were on the brink of something extraordinary, a connection that transcended fear itself. What if Thor truly wasn't just an attack dog, but also yearning for companionship? With each passing second, Mia's determination grew stronger alongside her hope that perhaps they could bridge the gap between two worlds. The world of fear ruled by Don Salvatore and his dog, and her own world filled with loneliness and longing for friendship. As she sat there with her fragile offering extended toward Thor, she could scarcely imagine how this simple act could alter their lives forever. A bond forming through vulnerability that might just challenge everything they thought they knew about one another and themselves. Mia held her breath as she knelt on the ground, piece of stale bread trembling in her small, outstretched hand. The tension in the air grew thick, and she could feel both Don Salvatore's piercing gaze and Thor's intense scrutiny. But rather than being frightened, the moment sparked something inside her, a fierce determination that surged through her veins. In that stillness, a chance encounter unfolded that held the potential to change everything. Thor's growl faded into an amazed silence, and Mia's heartbeat echoed loudly in her ears as she softly whispered again, "It's okay." She hoped that sound would carry compassion instead of fear. Slowly, she leaned forward further, her fingers brushing against the cold ground as she waited for a response. Then, astonishingly, something shifted in Thor. Instead of lunging toward her in defense, he shifted his great weight, stepping cautiously closer. A hint of curiosity replaced the sharp edge of aggression in his stance. Mia's heart raced. She wondered if this was truly happening. Could this dog that everyone feared be ready to understand her? Don Salvatore squinted at Mia, his imposing figure watching every movement. The girl was unlike anyone he had ever encountered, a small child displaying bravery where grown men trembled. He recognized her vulnerability and knew Thor sensed something fascinating about her presence. As Thor neared, Mia shifted the bread closer to him. Her gaze softened as she spoke again. "I won't hurt you. I promise." The sincerity in her voice floated into the charged atmosphere. She felt a powerful connection forming between them, one that transcended their respective worlds, a world filled with fear for them both. With a sudden gentleness, Thor lowered his head toward her offering and sniffed curiously at the bread. There was a brief moment of hesitation. It was as if he were weighing a decision between two paths, one of ingrained ferocity, or another that invited possibility. Then, cautiously, he took the piece from her hand with a delicate movement, careful not to harm the girl who dared to show him kindness. Mia's pulse quickened. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. The monster that haunted the streets had become nothing more than a hungry dog seeking food. Not just any food, but an offering that felt like friendship. As he chewed the stale bread slowly, she sensed a genuine change in his demeanor. It was as if a weight had been lifted from both their shoulders. The Mafia boss looked on in quiet amazement. He had always encouraged Thor to be fierce and imposing, but never allowed him to explore affection or gentleness as he now was with this little girl. Salvatore felt an unfamiliar pang in his chest, the stirrings of something he thought long buried. Hope, perhaps. Here was this girl daring to rewrite history in a way the town had never deemed possible. Encouraged by Thor's open response, Mia took another brave step forward. Using soft words and gentle movements, she reached out to pat his shoulder, discovering layers of powerful muscles under his fur, but also recognizing an unexpected warmth emanating from him. This was no longer just a terrifying dog, but an entity capable of experiencing kindness. "You're not a monster," she whispered, as if sharing a secret with him alone. "You're strong. I can see that." It fascinated her how the mighty dog could display vulnerability before another creature, especially when he'd spent so long being wrapped in fear. As moments stretched on, this simple act, a girl offering food and friendship, began to bridge the chasm between fear and companionship. Unknown to them all, the dynamics around Don Salvatore and Thor were shifting into uncharted territory, where human connection could manifest through vulnerability and grace. No one in town would have imagined that at this very moment, amidst secrecy and danger, a profound bond was blossoming between a fierce guard dog and a homeless girl who longed for acceptance. Neither of them knew it yet, but their chance encounter bore the seeds to challenge their lives forever, solving questions rooted in loneliness and fear while planting hopes of love and trust instead. As Mia knelt on the ground, she felt a strange warmth fill the space between her and Thor. The air around them seemed to shift, transforming from one of fear to something softer and more inviting. With each slow chew of the stale bread, Thor's demeanor softened, and Mia could see the dog's fierce exterior beginning to fade, revealing layers she had never expected. The moment hung between them like a fragile thread, connecting their two worlds. The world of a homeless girl seeking companionship, and the world of a fearsome guard dog trapped in a life of duty. For both of them, this encounter was unexpected. It was as if destiny had conspired to bring them together in that dark alleyway. Mia's heart raced with excitement as she reached out tentatively to stroke Thor's fur. She could feel the tension in his muscles begin to ebb away as he leaned into her touch. This simple act of kindness was breaking through the barriers that had kept them apart for so long. As she gently patted him, she whispered words that resonated with both of their hearts. "You're not alone anymore?" Thor paused mid-chew, his ears perked up at her voice. He seemed to understand her words in a way that transcended language. In that moment, Mia realized that beneath all the ferocity and strength lay a creature who, like her, sought connection and understanding. The thought filled her with hope. Perhaps they were not so different after all. Watching this exchange from a distance, Don Salvatore felt a mix of emotions swirl within him. He had always trained Thor to be strong and fearless, but he had never seen him respond with such gentleness before. This small girl had somehow unlocked something within the dog that he had buried deep under layers of aggression and intimidation. For the first time in years, Salvatore felt the stirrings of something he had long forgotten: empathy. As Mia continued to stroke Thor's back, she noticed something else beginning to change. The tension in her own body started to dissipate as well. The fear that usually accompanied being near Don Salvatore melted away in the warmth of this unexpected connection. It was as if her bravery had forged an invisible bridge not only between herself and Thor, but also toward the Mafia boss himself. "Why are you so fierce?" Mia asked softly, directing her gaze at Thor while still petting him. "You don't have to be alone." Her words hung in the air like a gentle invitation for understanding. Thor leaned into her hand further, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as though he was acknowledging her question. Not just as a beast, but as a being capable of feeling loneliness and longing for connection. Don Salvatore watched closely as this small act transformed his once mighty dog into something more: a partner, rather than just an enforcer. He couldn't help but feel affected by the scene before him. Perhaps it was time for him to reconsider how he viewed his own life and those around him. Suddenly, Mia felt emboldened by this new connection. She looked up at Don Salvatore, who remained silent yet attentive. "He's not really a monster," she said boldly, hoping to reach him through his hardened exterior. "He just needs someone to show him love, just like I do." Salvatore raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this girl's audacity. No one ever spoke to him with such honesty, especially not someone considered beneath him in status. Yet here she was, an innocent child challenging everything he thought he knew about loyalty and strength. In that moment, as Mia continued to bond with Thor while speaking openly with Don Salvatore, an unexpected connection formed among the three of them, a bond defined by vulnerability rather than fear. It began to dawn on Salvatore that perhaps strength didn't only come from fear instilled in others, but could also emerge from compassion shared among unlikely friends. Little did they know that this encounter would set forth ripples of change far beyond their small corner of the city, changing their lives forever in ways they could never have imagined. As Mia knelt on the ground, her hand gently resting against Thor's fur, she could feel the palpable change in the atmosphere, like a magic spell weaving through the air. Thor's intense gaze softened as he chewed the piece of bread she had offered, and for the first time, Mia saw beyond his fearsome exterior to the creature yearning for companionship and understanding. Thor paused mid-bite, his large amber eyes looking directly into Mia's. In that moment, something shifted within him, a flicker of awareness that perhaps this girl was different from all the others who had avoided him. She didn't see him as just a monster, but as a living being capable of feeling loneliness. Her gentle touch and kind words seemed to resonate with an unspoken truth deep inside him. With each stroke of her hand along his back, Mia felt Thor's muscles begin to relax. The tension that had always surrounded him started to dissipate, revealing the gentle giant beneath the fierce facade. It was as if he finally understood that this girl wasn't there to threaten him or challenge his strength. She was offering something far more precious: acceptance. "See? You're not so scary," Mia whispered softly, her voice filled with encouragement. "You have a kind heart in there, I know it." Thor tilted his head slightly in response to her words, and for a heartbeat, it felt like they were sharing a secret only they could understand. Moments stretched into eternity. This connection forged between them was unlike anything either had experienced before. The transformation in Thor was evident. The once mighty guard dog seemed to soften under Mia's care. Mia noticed how Thor's breathing slowed and became calmer as he leaned into her touch even more. It was as if he were absorbing her warmth and kindness, like a sponge soaking up water after a drought. A sense of peace enveloped them both in that moment. It was an unspoken agreement between two souls longing for companionship in their own ways. Meanwhile, Don Salvatore stood watching with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. He had never seen Thor respond this way before. Most people would shrink back in fear when faced with his imposing presence. But here was a small girl who dared to reach out and break down barriers years in the making. Salvatore felt an unfamiliar stirring deep inside, a mixing pot of emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Mia continued her gentle ministrations, feeling emboldened by Thor's acceptance of her approach. "You need someone to love you," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself more than to the dog. "Just like I need someone too." As words flowed naturally from her heart, she wondered if Thor could sense their shared loneliness, a reflection of each other's deepest vulnerabilities. With newfound confidence from their bond growing stronger by the minute, Mia took a bolder step forward. She reached out to scratch behind Thor's ears, an act that normally would have sent anyone else running, but instead elicited a low whine of pleasure from him. The sound filled her with warmth. It made her realize how desperately he craved affection. In response to this unexpected tenderness from his formidable companion, Thor leaned against her leg, a gesture that spoke volumes more than words about trust being established at last. It became clear. This monstrous dog had been waiting for someone brave enough to break through his tough exterior. Don Salvatore felt an ache spreading through him as he witnessed this unfolding connection, something he thought impossible for both himself and his loyal dog, now taking shape right before his eyes. He began questioning everything he believed about strength. Perhaps true power lay not in fear, but in reaching out and forging bonds instead. The scene held an undeniable magic as Mia continued connecting with Thor while Don Salvatore observed closely. The world around them fading away until only they existed within that dark alleyway drenched in emerging light. Little did they realize that at that very moment, they were creating ripples of change far beyond their immediate surroundings, shifting perspectives on loyalty, connection, and compassion for years to come. As Mia continued to bond with Thor, Don Salvatore remained rooted in place, his mind racing with a tumult of emotions he had long suppressed. He had always believed that strength lay in fear, that power was defined by the ability to intimidate others. But standing there, watching this small girl erase the boundaries he had carefully constructed around his dog and himself, he felt a crack begin to form in his armor. In all his years of ruling the shadows of the city, he had never witnessed anything quite like this. Even as a mafia boss, used to dealing with danger on a daily basis, he felt completely unprepared for what was unfolding before him. The transformation happening right in front of his eyes was both bewildering and enlightening. Mia's laughter echoed softly as Thor leaned into her hand, enjoying her gentle scratches behind the ears. It was a sound so pure and innocent that it seemed to cut through the thick tension surrounding them all. As she chuckled at something Thor did, a cute tilt of his head, or perhaps a playful pawing, Salvatore felt an unfamiliar flutter in his chest, almost like joy. How could this be? Joy was something he had not embraced in years. For Don Salvatore, kindness was a luxury he didn't think existed. It had always been about survival in the brutal world he inhabited. Yet here was Mia, standing strong against fear and rejection while offering love and warmth where no one else dared. With each passing moment, it felt as if she were chipping away at the cold layers surrounding his heart. But despite this emotional upheaval within him, Salvatore felt a surge of protectiveness rise up. How could she be so foolishly brave? Did she not realize who stood before her? Just moments ago, the fierce aura of fear wrapped around him like a cloak. Now it felt tattered and insignificant when compared to what Mia had brought into the mix. Mia, he found himself saying almost without thinking. His voice broke through the silence with an unexpected softness. You should be careful. She looked up at him then, her expression unwavering. Instead of recoiling from his presence, the dangerous mafia boss that everyone feared, she held his gaze firmly. Why? Because I decided to offer kindness instead of fear? Her words held no accusation. Rather, they were an invitation for understanding. That simple question hung between them like an invisible thread connecting their vastly different worlds. Mia's world filled with vulnerability and longing versus Salvatore's world, dominated by control and intimidation. He couldn't reconcile how she could see through him so easily, how she could recognize that beneath all that power was still a man searching for meaning beyond his ruthless actions. In that moment of vulnerability shared between them, Thor let out a soft whimper, as if sensing the emotional intensity filling the air. It was almost as though the big dog himself wanted to mediate this unspoken conversation taking place between two unlikely allies. As Mia reached under Thor's chin in a gesture meant solely for him, Don Salvatore felt something crystallize within him. This little girl was teaching him more than he'd ever known about connection and acceptance. Suddenly, it struck him. Perhaps real strength wasn't about instilling fear, but instead about building trust and fostering relationships. Unwittingly inspired by Mia's courage, Salvatore took a tentative step closer, feeling as though he were walking on new ground. You're brave, he conceded quietly, unable to mask the genuine admiration tinged with disbelief at how easily she had broken down barriers formed over countless years. And you can be too, Mia replied gently but firmly. You don't have to live in fear or be feared by others. Don Salvatore felt astonished by her words. They bore weight like none other he'd encountered before. A part of him yearned for change against the backdrop of chaos that defined his life thus far. Could this encounter open doors to new possibilities? As these thoughts swirled in his mind and converged with newfound emotions, strengthening their bonds forged through courage and kindness, right there in that shadowy alleyway, They unintentionally set off ripples of transformation, not just for themselves, but throughout their lives moving forward. A path toward understanding that led away from darkness into light. With each passing moment, the bond between Mia and Thor deepened, creating an unexpected alliance that felt like a gentle revolution. Mia continued to reach out to Thor, her fingers gliding over his back as she whispered words of encouragement. Each kind touch seemed to chip away at the layers of fear and aggression that had historically defined him. It was a delicate dance, careful yet purposeful, as if they were two artists crafting a masterpiece of trust and companionship from the raw materials of vulnerability. Thor, who had once been the embodiment of intimidation, responded openly to Mia's warmth. He leaned into her strokes, softening with every kind word she offered. With each session together, he would nuzzle closer, as if seeking a deeper connection. For Mia, these tender interactions eluded words. They spoke volumes about the magic contained within simple acts of kindness. As days turned into weeks, their ritual grew comfortable and familiar. Mia began bringing scraps of food, not just for Thor, but also for Don Salvatore, a simple gesture that surprised everyone, including herself. With every small piece of bread she offered, she sought to extend a bridge connecting her world with theirs. Even though Don Salvatore remained guarded, he could not help but feel touched by her unwavering kindness. It slowly started to thaw the icy fortress around his heart. One day, while sitting on the ground beside Thor, Mia noticed how much the dog looked forward to her visits. His tail wagged excitedly when she approached. This brought an immense sense of pride and joy to her heart. She wanted nothing more than to be a safe haven for this creature who deserved love and affection just as much as anyone else. "You're my best friend," she whispered to Thor one afternoon, her voice laced with sincerity. The transformation in Thor was becoming evident. The aggressive growl that once terrified people was replaced by playful barks full of excitement whenever he saw Mia. They were no longer just two beings crossing paths, but instead had become allies facing the world together in their own unique way. Caught up in this change was Don Salvatore, who observed it all from the sidelines while wrestling with emotions he had buried for years. He watched as Mia embraced his dog without fear. There was something mesmerizing in her ability to draw out Thor's gentler side. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Salvatore finally stepped forward from the shadows where he typically stood apart. "You really care for him," he said quietly, as if speaking more to himself than to Mia. Mia looked up at him with bright eyes filled with hope. "He isn't just a guard dog," she replied earnestly. "He's also lonely and scared, just like I am sometimes." That admission struck Don Salvatore profoundly. It was a stark reminder that beneath their hardened exteriors lay fragile souls vulnerable to fear and longing for connection. As they exchanged glances filled with understanding, it became clear that neither of them needed to navigate life alone anymore. As if sensing a shift in their dynamic, Thor walked over to Don Salvatore and sat at his feet, a sign of trust that echoed through the alleyway like thunderclaps rolling across the sky. The Mafia boss stared down at his loyal companion in disbelief. A moment of revelation washed over him. In that space between acceptance and vulnerability stood not only Thor, but also a new definition of strength crafted through friendship and companionship. The kind that knows pain and sadness yet lets light in through cracks developing within oneself. Mia found courage rising within her as she recognized the change igniting in Salvatore's eyes, a flicker of something unfamiliar but wholly welcome: hope. She felt certain that even amidst darkness, fragile bonds could begin to build bridges toward understanding and love. "Can we all be friends?" she asked innocently yet boldly, the very question embodying her heart's desire. Don Salvatore's breath caught slightly in his throat as he contemplated that simple request, the opening for change bubbling just beneath the surface after years spent hidden away within darkness. Eventually, he nodded slowly and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Yes," he replied quietly, feeling lighter than he had in years. Little did they know that this decision marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey together, a tale reshaped through compassion and connection instead of fear, and perhaps even saved them all from lives once draped under shadows. As twilight settled over the city, casting long shadows in the alleyway where Mia, Thor, and Don Salvatore stood, a surge of emotions filled the air. It was an evening charged with the weight of unspoken words and unexpressed feelings, an emotional climax that felt as if it had been building for longer than any of them could recognize. Mia, heart racing with a mix of hope and vulnerability, looked up at Don Salvatore with bright eyes. "Can we really be friends?" she asked softly, the innocence of her question piercing through the tough exterior he had built over the years. In that moment, she was not just asking for herself. She was seeking reassurance that they could all find solace in one another. For Salvatore, the question held incredible power. It echoed through his mind like a thunderclap, shifting something deep within him. A fragile thread connected them, a thread woven from shared loneliness and longing for acceptance. As he looked down at Thor, who rested his head gently on Mia's lap, Salvatore felt the weight of the world around him begin to dissipate. His menacing reputation seemed trivial compared to this transformative bond blossoming before him. "I've spent so long trying to control everything," he found himself admitting, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought strength meant being feared." The words hung heavily in the air, revealing vulnerabilities he had concealed for far too long. Mia nodded with understanding, providing a safe space for Salvatore's honesty, a gesture that sparked a flicker of hope within him. "But being strong doesn't have to mean being alone," Mia replied earnestly, her voice firm yet compassionate. In that moment, Salvatore's heart stirred unexpectedly. He felt the barriers that had confined him for years start to crack under the weight of Mia's words. It was as if she were peeling back layers of his soul he never considered removing, allowing light to seep through where darkness had reigned supreme. "Thor deserves love," Mia continued, looking at the dog affectionately. "Just like we do." Her simplicity cut through decades of hardened armor around Salvatore's heart. He glanced at Thor, who gazed back at him with trusting eyes, as if encouraging him to embrace this new possibility. In a rush of emotion, Salvatore dropped to one knee beside them, a gesture that surprised even himself. He reached out a tentative hand toward Thor, whose growl had long since faded into playful nudges against Mia's side. Hesitantly, he scratched behind Thor's ears. The bond between man and dog was palpable, filled with an energy that electrified the air around them. Don Salvatore found himself smiling for the first time in years. "Look at you," he murmured, marveling at how this fierce creature could exhibit such tenderness under the influence of a little girl's compassion. With each gentle stroke along Thor's back, it felt as if something inside Salvatore shifted completely, like a dam breaking free amidst torrential waters. The heaviness that had burdened him began to escape through laughter and tears alike. This moment was no longer just about power. It was about connection. Mia watched as Don Salvatore finally allowed some light into his heart, a change ignited by her bravery and Thor's gentle nature. It brought tears to her eyes to see such a transformation unfolding before her. Never had she imagined that her simple acts of kindness could reshape lives in this way. A soft whine broke through their emotional cocoon as Thor nestled closer to Salvatore's leg, almost urging him further into this newfound warmth, that closeness they all desperately needed. It became clear. They were no longer bound by past fears, but freed by hope and understanding. "I never wanted to be feared," Salvatore admitted quietly, his voice tinged with vulnerability as he looked at the girl who had caused all this change. "But I did want to be respected." "You can earn that by being kind," Mia offered, wisdom reflecting back from someone who had faced abandonment with grace. Feeling lighter than air, Salvatore smiled again. A genuine smile filled with possibilities instead of shadows. "Then let's start fresh," he suggested with newfound determination in his voice. Their fates intertwined through pain and joy alike. This trio stood poised on the brink of a journey filled with friendship and companionship. Trust blossoming amidst bonds formed in vulnerability. Little did they know that together they would rewrite not only their own stories, but also spread ripples of hope throughout the city's darkened corners, a testament to the extraordinary power kindness holds in transforming hearts once encased in fear and despair. As the days unfolded in their new reality, the transformation of hearts became increasingly evident. Mia, Don Salvatore, and Thor were no longer just a homeless girl, a mafia boss, and an attack dog. They had evolved into a makeshift family united by shared experiences, newfound trust, and the unbreakable bond of companionship. Mia took every opportunity to nurture her relationship with both Thor and Salvatore. She would often arrive at the alleyway with small treats for Thor, pieces of jerky or old bread that she had scavenged, and each time she did, she noticed how Thor's excitement mirrored her own. The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically as he anticipated her arrival, and his playful barks filled the air with sounds of joy that had long been absent in his life. "Look at you," Mia exclaimed one evening as Thor jumped about playfully, his energy infectious. "You're becoming quite the happy pup." The warmth in her voice coaxed out a bright spark in Thor's eyes, one that had been dimmed under layers of fear and duty. Salvatore watched these interactions with increasing admiration. He had begun to understand that joy could exist alongside the shadows of his past. With every laugh shared between Mia and Thor, he felt the weight of his own heart begin to lighten. It was a feeling so foreign yet so welcome that he found himself smiling more often, even laughing at Thor's antics. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays through the alleyway, Salvatore decided to join Mia on the ground. It felt strange to him at first, kneeling beside a homeless girl and a dog he once saw solely as a tool for intimidation. Yet there was something magical about this moment, an illumination that swept through him. "What do you think makes a family?" he asked Mia unexpectedly, curious about her perspective on life beyond survival. Mia looked thoughtful for a moment, then replied with innocence and wisdom beyond her years. "A family is people who care for each other," she said, glancing at Thor snuggled up beside them. "It doesn't matter where you come from. It's about who wants to be there for you when things get tough." Those words resonated deeply within Salvatore as he reflected on his own life, filled with power but devoid of genuine connection. He realized how desperately he craved what Mia described, a sense of belonging and care beyond fear or obligation. Would you be my family? He found himself asking, vulnerability lacing his voice as he searched for meaning in her response. Mia's eyes lit up, and her smile widened with glee. Of course. We can all be a family together. Her enthusiasm was contagious, igniting hope in Salvatore's chest. As days turned into weeks, their makeshift family began to grow stronger with each shared meal, each laughter-filled moment spent together. They created rituals: dinner time whenever Mia brought food, playtime in the evenings with Thor racing after sticks, and quiet nights where they simply enjoyed each other's presence. Each of these moments served to deepen their bond further. Don Salvatore discovered joy in watching Mia care for Thor and vice versa. It unveiled layers of humanity he thought he had lost forever. The more time they spent together, the more he felt himself transforming from a feared mafia boss into someone capable of love and laughter. However, it wasn't just Salvatore who was changing. Mia felt empowered too. As she embraced this new dynamic, she found herself growing stronger emotionally. No longer merely surviving, but thriving with newfound confidence buoyed by the bonds she forged with Salvatore and Thor. In moments when darkness threatened to creep back into her heart, it was the light of their companionship that drove it away. She began to believe that kindness could heal wounds deeper than any physical scars she'd endured throughout her life. One evening, while sitting beneath the stars twinkling overhead like diamonds scattered across velvet fabric, Salvatore turned toward Mia and Thor nestled at his feet. "I never thought I could find peace," he said softly, emotion thickening his voice. "But you've both shown me that it's possible." Tears brimmed in Mia's eyes as she realized just how far they had come since that first day she approached them in the alleyway. Their journey had transformed not only their lives but also their hearts, remaking them into vessels of compassion instead of fear. Together they sat in quiet solidarity beneath the vastness of the night sky, a trio bound not by past shadows but rather illuminated by hope's gentle glow. A testament to the extraordinary power love holds in transforming even the most hardened hearts. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of deep orange and soft purple, Mia, Don Salvatore, and Thor sat together in their quiet alleyway, a space that had transformed from one of fear into a sanctuary of hope. The air was alive with the lingering warmth of their new bond, and laughter often echoed against the walls, drowning out past shadows. Mia looked at Salvatore and Thor, her heart swelling with gratitude for what they had built together. Never would she have imagined that on this journey filled with uncertainty, she would find not just companionship but an unexpected family. Each day, as they shared meals and stories under the vast sky, she realized how these moments knitted their lives together like pieces of a vibrant tapestry. "Do you remember when we first met?" Mia asked one evening, her voice playful yet reflective. "You didn't want anything to do with me or my food." Salvatore chuckled softly, shaking his head as he brushed his hand affectionately over Thor's back. "I thought I had everything figured out," he admitted. "But I was wrong." His gaze shifted to Mia, a girl who dared to challenge his views on strength and compassion. Thor let out a small bark as if agreeing with him, a joyful sound that seemed to reverberate throughout the alleyway. The once feared attack dog had transformed into a cheerful companion, relishing in the happiness that surrounded him. The spark in his eyes shone brighter than ever as he nuzzled closer to Mia. "Look at him," Mia exclaimed with delight. "He's so happy now. You both are my favorite." Her words spilled forth like sunshine, illuminating their little world together. With every exchange filled with laughter and playfulness came the undeniable truth. They had created something extraordinary amidst a backdrop once defined by fear. Salvatore could hardly recognize himself anymore. He was no longer the ruthless boss shrouded in shadows, but rather a man filled with possibility and warmth. "What do you think it takes to truly change?" Salvatore pondered aloud one night as they sat around a small fire made from scraps gathered during the day. The flickering flames danced like memories waiting to be made anew. Mia contemplated for a moment before responding. Her young yet wise perspective always amazed him. "It takes love and courage," she said simply. "You have both now." Her sincerity struck deep within Salvatore's heart, like an arrow hitting its mark. Through each new experience, the laughter shared over silly games or quiet evenings spent watching stars, they were forging paths toward healing, not only for themselves, but also for each other. Together, they were learning how to embrace vulnerability instead of fearing it, a lesson lacking in Salvatore's often harsh world. One evening, under a crystal-clear sky filled with twinkling stars, Mia felt compelled to share her story, the story of loss, resilience, and hope that had brought her here to this moment beside them. As she spoke about her past, Don Salvatore listened intently. There was no judgment held in his gaze, only empathy taking root within. "Just because things started off difficult doesn't mean they always will be," she concluded quietly but firmly, her unyielding spirit evident as ever. Salvatore felt moved by her words. They hit close to home as he too remembered moments placed behind walls, built through years of hardening himself against pain and vulnerability. He had tried to shield himself from the world around him, convinced strength was rooted solely in intimidation. But tonight, he learned otherwise. As tears brimmed in his eyes for the first time in memory, while listening to her story unfold under starlight, deeply rooted chains began breaking apart, each piece falling until at last something pure remained within. Acceptance intertwined with newfound friendship. "We may have started as strangers," he said slowly while wiping away tears that fell unashamedly down his cheeks. "But we're family now." Mia beamed brightly at him. She could feel the truth pulsating between them, an undeniable connection fostered through shared experiences of struggle and triumph alike. Their pasts no longer binding, but instead setting them free for what lay ahead together. In this moment, concluded not only their pasts riddled with darkness, but also lit up excitement sparked by possibilities woven into their future. A future built upon trust, where compassion reigns supreme. From that day forward, each challenge faced would be met side by side, not just bonded by survival but guided onward through love. A shared journey defining family, blossoming among even life's most unexpected corners. A testament to courage uncovering hope where none existed before.